Welcome to Audio Gyan with Kedar Nimkar, a podcast that documents insightful conversations with Indian designers, artists, musicians, writers, thinkers and creatives of all types. Catch us on iTunes or visit audiogyan.com for more Gyan sessions. Here's your host Kedar Nimkar.
Today I have Nina Sabnani with us. Nina Sabnani is an artist and storyteller who uses film, illustration and writing to tell her stories. She graduated in painting from the Faculty of Fine Arts, Vadodara, and received a master's degree in film from Syracuse University, New York, which she pursued as a Fulbright Fellow in 1997. Her doctoral research at IDC focused on Rajasthan's Kaavad storytelling tradition. After teaching for 2 decades at the National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad, Nina has made Mumbai her home. Currently, she is a professor at the Industrial Design Center, IIT Bombay. Nina's research interests include exploring dynamics between words and images in storytelling. Her work in film and illustrated books seeks to bring together animation and ethnography. So thank you, Nina, for giving us your time, and it's a real honor to have you on Audio Gyan.
Thank you.
I've kept the topic name as Landscape of Animation in India. So can you tell us a brief history of Indian animation? I mean, in terms of what were the key milestones, how it has evolved?
So animation was introduced to India a long time ago. Like even Dada Saab Phalke is supposed to have experimented. Yeah. Then there were people in Bengal, whoever had access to a movie camera and they could do stop frame animation. Mm-hmm. They were doing it, but it was never really a part of our language of communication.
Or just storytelling.
Or storytelling, because we were more into, oral narratives and don't forget we were under the British colonial rule for a very long time.
Yeah.
So when cinema is not very old, as a technology. So when it came to people with means in India.
Okay.
And only after we got our freedom, and Nehru was in this, building the nation, kind of nationalism was high, nation building was very, important for the government, that they set up the films division. Mm-hmm. And in films division, they had a section for children's film.
Okay.
And for some reason, in animation got introduced to India through the government and as a propaganda tool. So in 1956, there was a person invited from the Disney Studios, Claire Weeks. Mm-hmm. He came and he trained the first lot of animators in India. Okay. In which you will know Ram Mohan, who is supposed to be the father of Indian animation. Mm-hmm. He was one of the students of Claire Weeks. Mm-hmm. So 1956, they set up a cartoon unit at the films division. Mm-hmm. It was a special unit. Mm-hmm. Only thing was that time they were, and those days they used to show animation as a part of the main feature. So just before the main feature film started in any cinema hall, there would be one was the newsreel.
Correct.
And the other one was a little cartoon. So they were showing a lot of Disney films also, because India was not producing that much. So when the cartoon unit came, they were making more like kind of propaganda films, like
educating the.
Yes, because how else do you reach? Now we have TV. There was not TV then.
Yeah.
So how do you reach a mass? So that, and people don't go to learn things. When they go for entertainment. So before you start the main entertainment, you see a little bit of animation.
But was it effective?
We don't know, but it was definitely it was something that people started associating. The Disney films for entertainment and the government FD films with social communication. Mm-hmm. So there were films on national integration, there were films on family planning, and those kind of things were there. So not until we have TV that animation really becomes what it is today. Even so, the people who experimented with animation, with the form, with the content, at FD, at the cartoon unit, and then they also set up, like Ram Mohan also had his own, and Bhim Sen, and Kanti Lal Rathod. These were the people who were first, the first animators, one would say, like, who were trained, and they had their own studios also, so they were doing commercials. And so some experimentation was going on, in commercials, as it is today. If you see the kind of, experimental work that happens in animation, it normally happens either in commercials, or it happens in, little TV, on TV, but not on the regular, not long films, not in the feature film, category, not so much. Then I'm jumping the gun. I'll come back to you on the history.
Yeah.
So what happens is the films division cartoon unit continues to make these films, and they also start a children's film society. See, because just making films is not enough. You also have to get it out to people.
Correct.
So once those things stopped, when people stopped showing the newsreel, they stopped. They didn't have these kind of films to be by Disney. They couldn't pay or something. I don't know, whatever the reason was that it was stopped. And it gave way to commercials, so distributors and cinema hall, operators were getting money to show commercials. So why would they show these kind of films? So somehow, somewhere it stopped. So then the only way to get these films out to the people became a problem. When television came, then again and now of course with your online, YouTube and everything is available. You can see things.
Yeah.
Even FD has put a lot of its films, online.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it used to come on Doordarshan. Then it sort of moved from there to there.
Yeah.
So it's been a very slow kind of a journey, especially because the way the commercial Hindi film, the Bollywood caught up, that kind of thing didn't happen with animation.
Correct.
It was like, chalo, Bollywood went from, you look at the films that were, in the 50s and you look at them today, there's some big sea change, They have progressed in many ways, every aspect. Well, technically, content-wise, it's more slick, more, looking at different things. Whereas animation has not been so quick because, one, there are no takers. We don't have the kind of audience. Then we may say we don't have the audience because we don't have the kind of films, We don't have the kind of films because there are not those kind of investors, in these kind of things. And whoever tried to do, the kind of feature or long films in animation, they were trying to do, like just translate the oral, the mythological into animation. Now, animation has it has a language which you have to learn.
Yeah.
There's a script that is required. There's a way to engage an audience, which when you make it just talking heads, people don't enjoy it as much. The talking head seems to work on TV. I mean, kids love to watch things that I watch, what these kids watch today on TV, a lot of talking heads, but there's also a lot of, interesting storytelling. So both things are important.
Yeah.
So once the TV comes, then there is little bit more, and then there are film festivals, and there's some deregulation that happens with, like, okay, you have deregulation happening with television. So now we have many channels,
Yeah.
When I was a student, when we did animation, we couldn't even buy film stock on our own. You had to be a producer, to be able to go and buy this thing. You couldn't process the film in Ahmedabad where I was studying or working. You had to come to Bombay, and you were not a feature filmmaker, so you had a small little reel which nobody had the time to process. It would take 15 days. They were called rushes, but it would take like a month, to get our film actually processed to see what we had shot. So it's come a long way.
Yeah, yeah. No, I would like to actually slightly go back to the same question and see if there are any references earlier to Dada Saheb Phalke also. Because recently, when I attended a workshop by Amrit Gangar, and he said Chitrapat is actually a very old.
Sure.
Was there animation in form of puppet or?
Of course, you have Rajasthani puppets, you have Pattachitra, you have the fur, you have the Kaavad. Of course, these are all four. What do you
not
call
traditionally
it?
fitting in the animation scene.
No, but
as in like the way we perceived animation today.
Yeah, even that is changing, because even now, today we are again going back to the same way. You have these performance animation where people are actually going from one frame to the other. The animation is happening in your head.
Yeah.
So actually, we are like turning the whole circle all the way back to the same thing, but in a different way. Sure, there are different. Sure, there are forerunners to animation. Some people have also said that if you look at the cave paintings of whether it's in Bhimbetka in India, or you look at the Altamira, Lascaux, caves, that those are Egyptian paintings, so long ago, that people, this need to see motion is an old one, So that is.
I think we'll venture into something more intense with that. Cool. So, are there any different types of animation? I mean, in terms of style, because at the one, like for a layman at least, at one spectrum, I see Toy Story, Finding Nemo, and one kind of animation at that end. And then there is other work which you have done, and I've seen, or right from the Doordarshan serials, the clips also about Ek Chidiya and Ek Chidiya. So there are this huge styles defined, right? So can you tell us more about it so that it can be like at least documented, that people who would be interested in getting into animation, they are at least exposed to a number of styles and not restrict in a very specific frame.
Yes, I think, there is always something that is mainstream, and then there is the experimental work, So we always start with some experiment, and then it becomes the norm. So, of course, because earlier, and it depends on the kind of films that you're making, the kind of technology that is available to you. So when people had, to shoot under a camera, they had to put the artwork and expose it frame by frame, or they were making feature films, then they had to evolve a style that many people could follow. And it was simple to do. So that's why if you see the kind of what is now come to be known as the Disney kind of animation, so what happens in that is there's a very high quality drawing, and then it is done on, it's called cell animation. So you draw it on cell, and then you paint it from the back, and then you reuse some of those things. You have cycles, because animation is a very tedious process to do. Yeah. So they developed a kind of ways and means by which they could reuse some of those things. So if somebody had to walk, so you made a walk cycle, and then you made the background, slide at the back. And because you had to make it transparent, so obviously you use cell sheets, what is celluloid sheet, and you can paint on it. So you paint on one side, outline on one side, you paint the color from the back. So that was there for the longest time. Then when you have, it's possible to actually get a kind of a tracing sheet on which you can draw with a pencil. Suddenly the animators realized we don't have to stick to this. So the National Film Board of Canada is one of the first ones to really try out all kinds of forms and techniques for animation. So they tried out stop frame animation, and I'm not saying only National Film Board of Canada, all across the world. If you look at the Czech animation, you see what happened in Zagreb, and those kind of animations you see, they were trying out various things. So from puppets to stop frame animation to working with sand to working with materials, animating. And Norman McLaren, he started this thing with animating. He made painted sound. He experimented with that, and then he drew directly onto film, and it came to be known as camera-less animation. And then you have Caroline Leaf. So there are lots and lots of people who started, but all of this was available in small bits in film festivals and things, and it's very personalized. So if you want to make a feature, it's very hard to retain that style, that so many people follow that style. If an individual animator is doing it, it's okay. But if say 200 people have to animate, and if you are making a feature, you have a very big team.
Correct.
All of them to follow your style is also. Then you have the software. Suddenly softwares become available by which you can do 2D animation, 3D animation. Again, it becomes possible to do this. You see, technology has a big role to play in the kind of forms and styles that you will evolve in animation. So now everything people are doing, because now the only limitation is your imagination. So I could work with the Kutchi artists, with embroidery. I can animate embroideries. I can animate the painted Kaavad on wood. So I have no limitations of the thing now. I'm not limited by I can't do this. In the past, even if I wanted to animate cloth, it would be damn tough. How to move it?
Yeah. Interesting, because that naturally flows into my next question. So in India, what do you think students should more concentrate on, like the medium or the message?
Shall I quote somebody who says the medium is the message? Okay, but the thing is,
Marshall McLuhan.
Yes, exactly. So now the thing is, as an animator, you don't have actors. You are the actor. So you have to know acting. You have to have the skills to create images. Whether you use somebody's images or you create your own images, but visual language is important. To understand that language is important. And just having a nice visual language is not sufficient. You should know how to tell a story. So it's like that. There's a very interesting story I remember now from one of those Sanskrit texts on how to create an image. So there is a king. He goes to this sage who's a master, and he says, I want to learn how to make these sculptures of gods so that I can understand the gods. So he says, sure, but before you can do that, you must learn how to draw. So he says, okay, teach me drawing. He says, but before you learn how to draw, you must understand rhythm. So you must learn music. So he says, okay. Then he says, but before that, you must know dance. So actually, he has to learn everything in order to create that image. So I think I would say for an animator too, it's not sufficient just to know one or the other. Then you become a cog in the wheel. If you want to make your own films, then you must have a understanding, if not the skill, of all aspects. Whether it's understanding story and the script, acting, music, because animation flows with music.
Correct.
And it's so, you have to understand psychology, because you have to be able to create characters that, are very loaded with symbols, that they express everything.
Yeah, I mean, then that goes for any form of
For
art
any
in
form
general.
art,
But
exactly.
yeah, I mean, this question was mainly like geared towards understand, since India is rich with a lot of like
Wish.
philosophy, and the philosophy of even telling stories has been very profound in India. So that was like mainly to understand that if at all we have to venture as upcoming artists or upcoming students of animation, would it be, yeah, but I think that's
But I would be very careful there, because one is that, of course, we have a very rich tradition of image making, but it belongs in a context. It belongs to communities. Communities have been conserving and practicing them for ages. You cannot, as a filmmaker, you don't appropriate and say I'll make it mine. You at least I feel that it's nice then to work with those people, and that's what I do in my work as well. It's just like, but I'm not saying that this is the only way, but if you're looking at inspiration, I mean, you're saying that, as we have all this, what are we doing with this? But I think we should definitely, look into that direction, but together with them rather than just steal their art.
yeah, yeah. That I think, yeah, obviously. So where do you think India stands when it comes to art of storytelling, both in terms of the medium or the story itself? I mean, this question is mainly to understand, like when we are so rich in our stories and traditions, it's not evident in the media itself. So, like with the contemporary animation, obviously. So, can you tell us what or why, where it is lacking?
It's lacking in the way we are interpreting them, in the way we are understanding what it is, and we are we cannot just use the same methods in the way
The best.
like not just the West, but even our own traditions. So each like say theater has a certain form. It works in a particular way. Now you cannot, yeah, that's how cinema started. No, it started like they
Just
literally
mimicking the-
just
yeah.
like so I think when you do that, then something is lacking, so you have to evolve your language. So animation will have its own language. Now when you're trying to utilize a form that exists, something like, say, I'm looking at embroidery. Now one is I can do it exactly how it is. The other is, I have to use it. I have to still use my cinematic language. So I have to understand the cinematic language and then use it to tell the story that they want to tell. So storytelling is important, but storytelling in the form where you have to understand that certain things are going to be done by the image, certain things are going to be done by the voice, what somebody is going to speak. Certain things are going to happen by what acting is happening, what symbols you're using, and the music. So it's just all these things. If everything is, imitating each other, like the man is saying "Dekho kaun aaya," then somebody came. It's so literal. When you make it so literal, then you don't hold the attention. So this tightness between what you're showing, what you're saying, what you're hearing, and what is it that you don't say at all, which you leave for the audience also to surmise on their own, and that's the fun. See, even as a spectator, you enjoy that you come to certain conclusions of your own without being told everything.
Correct.
We tell too much.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons would be because it's always perceived as a children
एक तो ये भी problem है.
Yeah, that I think
It
that
has
was,
been, because it was started that way,
Yeah.
so somewhere in people's mind, it has been now associated only with children. So they don't see the potential of it for, adults.
Yeah, I've seen this with magic also, for example, because when magic is, when we think of it in a traditional sense, at least in the Indian context, it's always
That's right.
in parties or birthday parties and that way. But if you look at, I don't know, I can generalize as West, but generally, if you see a lot of magic done in Europe or in US, they are much more evolved in terms of the skill set also and the storytelling also. So I guess the like yeah, I'm sort of getting the answer that you first need to master the medium of storytelling in general and then get to
But you'll have to also see storytelling in terms of images. So now you see graphic novels; they also tell stories. But it's just there's also movement. There's everything in that.
yeah.
Which is imitating. It's very cinematic in its approach. So there's a lot that animators shouldn't learn only by looking at other animations. They should look at other art forms around them.
Yeah.
That's what I feel.
Yeah. So Nina ma'am, I would like to conclude with last question, which is I think very close to what you're doing right now. So what are the possible research areas in animation, especially for Indian students or aspiring artists or like future animators?
So there are three ways in which you may explore, what you could do in terms of research. One is you see what are the various ways in which you can animate, the forms, the techniques or whatever. The other is, the very many ways in which you understand how people are receiving animation. It could be how audiences receive animation, or how do you see animation. We are always used to seeing animation in a screen. But now, you see people doing, still the screen is, we are caught in that.
Yeah.
But, people are doing this performance animation. So they are doing things. And so that's trying to see how people, where the animation is happening. Inside your head, in your imagination, or just actually you see the whole thing unfold in front of you, or the memory of it. So in that sense, it can also be in audience studies, like I said. It could also be with different materials, And in my case, for example, I'm exploring it as a way of, my research findings. How do I represent them? So I have been with a community. I've been with a community that creates its own art. And it has its reasons for creating that art. So I'm bringing their voice, their art into a public, consciousness by animating it. Because when you see a tapestry, by somebody, you don't know what it actually means to them, or what meaning they're investing into it. You see it for what you can understand. And when you go to a museum, you see an object. The object doesn't tell you the story. But when you animate it, and it's there is a narration behind it, So it's also a way of conserving a voice, which what we call this intangible heritage. So I see animation doing that as well.
Wow. Cool. Yeah, I think this is a good note to end this. Obviously, there are thousands of things unexplored in the whole scheme of animation. And I would also like to have one more audio GAN with you where we probably deep dive into Kaavad storytelling, which is your major work. But yeah, I think this is good for this session. So thank you once again for giving us your time, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
And that's it from today's Gyan session. Catch us on iTunes, Savan, Stitcher or any podcasting app you use. Do rate us on iTunes and follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Stay tuned for more Gyan on audiogyan.com. Till then, bye.